Hey guys, welcome to the secret history living in your aquarium. Today we're going to be talking about how to get shy fish to come out. Now there are a lot of different tips I have for you. Some of them I'm sure you've heard of, and others maybe not so much. There's a few things that I can recommend that I don't think most people have tried, and I know for a fact have really helped out in my fish room. You know, things like visibility in the water, breaking up sight lines, the quality of the water parameters meeting their wild standards, as well as, you know, other things like feeding, how you feed, what you feed, when you feed, things like having special times for feeding. So we're going to go over all this pretty quick today, but hopefully it will get some of your shy fish to become a little less shy. And let's take a look at some tanks and discuss this stuff. Alright guys, so this is my shy tank extraordinaire. I have erythromicrons in here, which if you've kept them, you know, they really don't like coming out. I have gobies in here, same deal. They don't really like hanging out in the open in most tanks. I have a couple small plecos in here that are of the Peclotia type. They don't like coming out. And you know, there's a couple things that you have to hit right off the bat. First of all, it's group size. So a fish isn't going to be comfortable. Look at, lights are just turning on and we've got an erythromicron coming out. So just take note of things like that. Even the shrimp are starting to come out with the lights on and hang out in spots that maybe they wouldn't in other tank. Even though they have predators. Look at this erythromicron cruising out right into the open water. So just take note of some of the fish that you may see that normally don't like to come out into the open water. You know, we've got lizard whiptail cats that usually hide and cling to things. See if any of them appear in a moment. So we'll see. But first thing is group size. You want to make sure that whatever fish it is, you look up and see if it needs a proper size group of, you know, 3, of 6, of 10, of 20, whatever it may be. Erythromicrons, for instance, they're going to need at least 6 to even feel remotely comfortable. In the wild, we're talking groups of hundreds in a shoal, and then they'll school off together in tighter groups on their own. So think about the numbers. And when you think you have enough, add a few more. That will really help. The next thing I have is your hiding spots and your aquascaping. So around the margins of your tank, see the back there? Make hiding spots where they feel secure. So spots where you won't see them. One of the biggest tricks in this hobby that I've learned is that if you give them hiding spots, that doesn't mean you'll never see them, with the exception of maybe cully loaches and a few fish. Maybe a few plecos do that also. But what it means is that you are going to give them the option to hide, and that will give them the confidence to not hide, to actually come out and to feel like they can skirt the edge of that territory. So over here we've got a Palawan riffle goby that's coming out and doing his thing, coming to eat on the biofilm. This one is a more bold cobalt blue goby, but they're both Synodontis and they both can be very shy. And so part of the reason is because they can zip right back into their hiding spot if they do feel insecure. So just the fact that they have that and that they can zip back down, if you just saw the little Synodontis there, he just did that. The fact that they can get back to hiding, the fact that they've got some loose foliage and coverage that they can zip back into is really helpful. It really brings out a lot of activity in them. It'll bring out activity in shrimp too, because they can hide within mosses or loose leaf plants where there's little hiding areas. They know how to evade fish by darting off from those spots. That's what they do in the wild. So that's one way. Another way is to block lines of sight. So here we've got a big old line of sight that is blocked by this tiger lily. No problem. You know, for any critters that want to come browse in the sand like the Siphodons do. And then over here, you know, we can have tetras or pseudomagills, more of the gregarious fish and the endlers browsing wherever they feel like. So Breaking up lines of sight will help too, especially if there's any bigger fish or schools of other fish. Just kind of compartmentalizing the tank helps. Now, you can leave an open space above these compartments, and then that gives them room to swim and to pace and to do whatever they want. It feels open and natural. But they kind of have their own little area, and then the spot to dart into cover. Their own little area, a spot to dart into cover. And you'll see that theme in most of my tanks. So next, I'm going to recommend that in these corners, just kind of block them off. I mean, they can go back in there if they want, but put debris, put foliage, put whatever you want in there to kind of make it so they have a corner that's safe. And the other thing I like to recommend is putting, I mean, this is just as cheap as it gets. It's cardboard. I put cardboard in on the sides of my tank just so it's opaque, just so you can't see through the glass, because fish can see through the glass. See? Oh, scares them. And that will really help calm them down. So whether it's cardboard, or you paint the tank black, or you throw a towel over it, or whatever you want to do, blacking that out is really going to help. The last part of this visibility and decor thing that I would recommend is think about where your fish is from. If it's a true blackwater species, you know, angelfish or something, you're not going to have a problem with angelfish. But if you have a species that lives in turbid or muddy waters, maybe bettas or licorice gouramis or some other type of gourami perhaps, the smaller ones that are a little more shy, maybe you want a bunch of tannins in the water. I mean, maybe you want a tank that's that much tannin. And remember, they have that sensitivity. They're used to whether it's silt or debris or tannins or leaves or whatever it may be. All these tanks I have, I can get shy fish to come out by having, just emulating what those species have in nature to some degree. Even if it's not all the boxes being checked, you can get most of them. So the next one I want to recommend for the habitat is going to be overhangs for plecos and gudgeons, or if you have any sort of little, you know, a lot of people keep dwarf cichlids. So for instance, I have some apistos here. Instead of just giving them caves, which caves are great too. Sorry about the glare here, folks. We'll try to block it somehow. Yeah, maybe we can't. But instead of just blocking or using caves and blocking off spaces with little caves that are pre-made, you can use things like wood. You can use stone and leave overhangs. Some fish like to breed vertically, straight up and down, like angelfish on a cone or on a piece of wood. Others like to lay just on the mouth of a cave, you know, or on the roof of a cave ceiling. And yet again, others like overhangs. So that giving them the area that they feel like is their nest, is their natural home, especially with cichlids. That's going to be a key thing you can do. I mean, I do the same thing over here, and in the back of the tank, we've got lots of moss areas where they can hide, but I've also hidden all sorts of both manufactured caves and rock hangovers here where they can slip back under there and hide. Now, I can't always see them in all those spots, but that's not the point. The point is so that they're happy and healthy, you know? That's the point. So, moving on from there, I would say that, you know, water quality is really important in these tanks. So, in here, some of my shyer fish are my peacock gudgeons, I would say, and my danios. Some of my Lake Inlay danios, here they come right now as we speak. They get pretty shy. They're not like leopard danios or zebra danios. They are pretty skittish. These are some kind of specialized wild caught ones, and they can get pretty skittish. That one's a kythit danio right up there, but these ones down here, not so much. And I find that water quality is what really helps them, matching their native water qualities. Again, you see I blocked off lines of sight. I gave everyone spots to dart back into, yet there's these pockets of open space that they can be in. I need to trim this tank, granted, but there's these pockets. See, yet again, there's pockets all over the place for different fish with different needs. And right here, we have a peacock gudgeon coming out to say hello, a very pregnant female full of eggs. So that goes back to also giving them their spots to spawn. With gudgeons and things, you can use PVC pipes. You can use a pen. Cut a pen in half, or into thirds, I should say, the ends off, and use the body of the pen, the shaft of the pen, as a little cave. So like a Sharpie or a highlighter for these really teeny species works really well. Rough it up a little bit, and that's another thing that will make them feel at home. Finding the little niches that are, you know, reminiscent of their wild spaces. But water quality is important, so change the water as often as you should for the species. With rainbow fish, you're going to want to do it, you know, as much as you can, constantly, daily if you can, or, you know, at least twice a week, 50%. That's going to really encourage their spawning and their activity and all sorts of other things. However, when we start looking at other fish, maybe, or shrimp for instance, you really want to do it subtly. So it's knowing what that fish needs and doing it as often as that fish species needs it. You can find this information online pretty easily. The other thing that I recommend, and I do it in a lot of my tanks, is I'll have two hang off the backs, or I'll put in another air stone. I'll put in, sometimes I've even used O2 gas, honestly. And what that does is it allows, and yet we have another shy species coming out, the 9-banded barbs, probably my shyest fish in here actually. And they live in a group, but they will not come out hardly ever in this tank with the angels, and we'll get to that in a minute about dither fish. But in any case, the O2 in the water really allows fish to sit, rest, and be merry and not worry. They don't have to stress about getting oxygen, moving water through the gills at a fast rate in order to stay healthy and to feel oxygenated. They can literally just relax. So that's always a good thing for them. And after that, I would say that the flow in the tank is important. So when we come back to tanks, whether it's this one here, I've got a natural flow, and you can see there's wood in the way, there's rocks in the way, breaking up that line of sight again. But over here, you know, I've got different power heads at different levels, and that flow really encourages different fish, whether it's the pseudomagills here, they're the ones who really like flow in this tank, or the gobies. It helps their muscle, it helps them feel at home, and so I'll turn that power head on half the day. And that really, really encourages a lot of activity. See, here we even have a pregnant shrimp right in the front of the glass right now. Now, they'll do that sometimes anyways, but I'm just trying to make the point that when they have this much cover, they're so much happier and healthier than in other tanks when they lack these things. So, moving down the list, I would say lighting is very important. So, we talked about blocking out the sides of the glass and blocking off predatory lines of sight, you know. They like being able to dart into cover. That's, most fish like that, even if they are predators. Another thing you can do is have floating plants. So floating plants are a good one in that it breaks up the ability for predators to come down from above. Birds are a real threat in the wild, as well as other fish coming down from above. But birds will be accounted for pretty well when you use floating plants or lilies, or even just some tall plants that overhang if you've got a deeper tank. You know, sometimes what I'll do is, like over here, I'll float other plants, and that allows things like these cichlids here, these apistos, to come out into the open. They feel pretty safe, and they'll come out all the way into the open. And then if they need to, they can dart back away. And again, they've got this ledge here, and they're kind of protecting this corner. But there's plants over here to break up that line of sight, and predatory fish won't be given the chance to come up, over, or down on them when there's thick vegetation like that. They're just not going to sneak up. That's why fish have lateral lines, is to sense those attacks, to sense those waves and pulses. So the next thing I'm going to say is that you can use a spotlight, like I'm doing here. Leave part of the tank dark, part of it light. Let the fish choose where they want to go, and plant accordingly You can get low light plants like I did here that are just a tangle floating, and yet that's where all the littler fish are going to hang out, is in that tangle. The cichlids, the dwarf cichlids, the apistos, they're going to hang out here because they feel like they've got a more open command of their space. They kind of define territory, and so they've claimed this open space. And that rock ledge right there that has a nice overhang on it is where the pair is hanging out of those Borelli opal apistos. So also, you want to definitely limit the amount of TV light or stereo noise that these fish are getting. I know that may sound kind of silly, but the vibrations from a stereo actually really do make fish nervous, and they're not natural. They're not used to these impulses of sound over and over and over again. And it's the same with if you're doing something loud, banging around in the kitchen or whatever it may be. You just want to watch the amount of sound that you're bombarding your fish tanks with, because at the end of the day, in the wild there are sounds, there's loud things, but they're using that quietness that you hear in the wild, or the animal calls you hear every now and then. They're using that soundtrack as their baseline for millions of years on when to fight, when to flee, or when to freeze. So the last thing that you can do setting-wise and your activity-wise before we talk about dither fish is fasting them on food. So when you don't feed them, it kind of slows their metabolism down sometimes, and it can kind of just chill them out. And I mean, do this every few days. Like, feed them for 3 days, then don't for 2 days. They can go a week, almost all species. If you know you have a special species or fry that needs special care, then this advice doesn't apply. But if you don't feed them all the time, then you're not going to have all the energy and the competition over the resources that you see in a tank that's always getting fed a few times a day, a little bit at a time. So I like to keep my fish a little hungry, and then when I do feed, another nice little trick is feed in the same spot. So all your top feeding fish, you can feed them up here. Then get some sinking pellets, feed them over here. And I like to tap on the glass, which scares everybody. You see the little vibrations make a huge difference. Everybody runs for the hills in this tank. But it makes a big difference, and then they know there's a signal. I don't tap on the glass for any other reason. You could turn the lights on and off, flickering maybe, I don't know. But think of something that lets them know you're coming, it's food time. Because then they all start to gather, they start to swarm, they think, okay, I'm going to get fed. Now I'm going to have to feed them right after this video. It's just like the Pavlovian dog, the bell makes the dog salivate. You know the old routine. So that's one good thing, and establish a pattern of when you do feed them, the way you do it and what you feed them. Make sure everyone in the tank is getting their share too. The last thing on the list of food is let them feed in open areas, but put the food on those margins of the hiding spots and the open areas. They'll dart out into the open areas to eat little things if they can. And on that note too, when you're feeding, I think it's best to feed a little less protein if the females are already swollen with eggs. Because unless you're fattening them up on purpose, this makes them on guard, and they're going to hide while they're swollen with eggs. So, for instance, these angelfish hide a lot more when they're pregnant, when the females are pregnant, than when they're not. Same with shrimp. They go hide because they're vulnerable when they're pregnant with all those eggs ready to go. So they hide, the males get more aggressive, and protein is how they build eggs. So you don't want to starve your fish nutritionally, but I'm just saying if you're not intending on breeding them, then you don't want like a 60% protein diet. You don't really want that anyways unless you've got a real carnivorous fish and you know what you're doing. So the last thing we're going to talk about real quick is dither fish. And basically, my thoughts on dither fish are what's happening in here. So the erythromicrons and even the little gobies are coming out now, and that is because there are fish out in the open. That tells them no one's attacking from above, below, or beside. There are schools, there are groups, and everyone is relaxed. When one fish is relaxed, the others are relaxed. And things like plecos, I've noticed, won't even breed sometimes, won't even come out. Here's a little bristlenose pleco. Unless they know that everybody's chill, that it's very calm, and that it's okay. And I would say there's an opposite that you can do too. If you want to see more fish, get a little bit aggressive of a fish, but not one that's going to hurt them. So like a cherry barb would be bad in this tank. They would nip at everyone. Barbs in general would be bad in this tank. But you could get one of the bigger tetras, or maybe you could put in those little peacock gudgeons that I have in the other tank, or maybe an apisto. And apistos can run off quite a bit of things, so can cribs, but usually they don't attack and kill things. They protect their area, and that can actually serve to scare out fish into the open that normally wouldn't hang out together. So I hope this advice helps, guys. I'll talk to you later. Click the bell if you want to hear more in the future. Have a great day.